Engels wilde doen. Dus,
Ja, heel graag. Dat zou namelijk voor de film het echt 10 keer makkelijker maken om het ook via het internet toegankelijk te maken voor het publiek.
Okay.
Open standaard.
Dan gaan we daar maar eens zwaar in geven. Kan ik beginnen?
Ja, en praat AUB luid.
Oké, nou, dan zonder gêne ga ik even praten. Welcome. This presentation will deal with a new approach to software, and actually it's what I call rethinking software with the implications for open source. Something about me. I have led a company as a director for 11 years in the open geo-ICT, Geographical Information Systems area. Based on open source and open standards, we provided mostly governmental institutes. I have been the initiator of the Open Geo Group. That's a cooperation of several geo-ICT companies in the open domain. I have set up with a couple of other companies the Open Source Software Supplier Association, which is unique in this world because it's the first open source trade association that has been established. I'm a columnist and writer for a magazine in the geo-ICT world and for the well-known Dutch magazine Computable. And I've written a booklet, Open Source Inside, which sort of gives away my background, and that is strategy and marketing. And now we are coming out of stealth mode with the age of peers. I am partner of a newly set up agency. We launch ourselves next week at the Open World Forum in Paris. It's a global agency that deals with business development, marketing services, community development, media relations in the open technology domain. And for the sake of argument, you could say data are not a technology, but I've put it in there anyway. We're an open service provider, which means that the open domain is our stamping ground. Other partners have been dealing with the open source open office community. One of us, Luis Suarez, is manager of that community. I have been involved with an open source software management policy project for the Dutch government, and that gives away the type of services that we provide. We develop markets, foster product adoption, raise visibility, and increase, hopefully, for all the companies and communities involved, new leads, new commerce. Going back a few years, in the 20th century, last century, we had the Geek Squad. That was the opinion the world had of open source. And in this century, we are in the age of Aquarius, and quite a lot of potential users still think that it's a bunch of hippies doing something. Meanwhile, we know better. The suits have taken over. If you look at a company called Red Hat, it's a company that is a regular, established multinational. And people walk around there in suits and in sandals, it doesn't matter. In earlier days, open source adepts were barbarians at the gate. And for some, it was the second coming. And our strategy revolved around running circles around the city walls of Jericho, blazing our trumpets, and hopefully the walls would come down. Well, things went differently. We are facing an uphill struggle in which we are still in the early stages of adoption. If you look at the total market share and the market share of open source in there, I would say it's negligible. Ooh, that's a different So personally I think we are on the left half of the graph still. But we need to move on. If you want to have a decent piece of bread with something on it, we call it in Holland, yeah, you need to do something. Well, help us on the way. There's a change coming. And finally, we get lucky. There's a damsel in distress waiting for our help, and here we come. Knights in shining armor. For those who play Dungeons and Dragons, I think you will recognize your own avatar there. At present, there's an economic crisis going on. Budget cuts are everywhere. For government, this means that they really have to look very carefully at what they spend on ICT. And meanwhile, considering the amount of projects that have been gone wrong in Holland, time is running out. So we need to rethink our ICT policy as a society, as a government. That's why I propose recycling, reusing our software code. And within the government, at the moment, there's a movement that says, hey, let's see what mileage is in reusing the code that we already use in our applications. Because one governmental agency uses the same type of application as another. Both have made it to measure, or had it made to measure for them. And so we have paid as a society twice for the same application. That's waste. Secondly, the quality of the application, because it is developed in a closed format, can be discussed. Which means, if you open source it, that's a new verb by the way, then more eyeballs will look at it and more people can sort of add functionality to it. And all the various institutes can use it and pay only once for it. Therefore, you have a more sustainable government ICT policy. Not the type of policy that is around now, but one that says, okay, how can we make our ICT policy more efficient? Meanwhile, as a government, you don't have to maintain and update your own software anymore. We can transfer that responsibility to a community, which you still need to develop, but it is more on arm's length, and it gives you more time and funding available for other things which you need to do as a government. The support question is also answered. It's not a general help desk anymore, but there is a community that can centrally, for all governments, give the support that the users need. Last but not least, it's cost effective, and by the way, it's good practice. Well, what do you need to do in order to outsource those governmental applications, which not have been supplied as an out-of-the-box solution? Well, you need to bring together the demand and the supply. Here you have a government with a piece of code. Is there somebody interested in taking it up and moving that forward, maintaining it, updating it, somewhere in the marketplace? You need to organize yourself, because it's a different way of operating. What is the quality of that software that is going to be outsourced by the government? You need an intake procedure. Those require quality standards. And by the way, who's paying for it all? And if that piece of software, that piece of code, or that component is handed over to the marketplace, under what license is it going to be? Open source, of course, but is there a specific license applicable within the OC range of licenses. Then you have the contracting issue. If somebody's going to pay for it, he or she, that company or that organization, wants something in return. So government has to contract with communities. That's a different ballgame. And on the long run, it needs monitoring, management, as usual. Well, we have the new verb, to open source. Often enough, that can be interpreted as throwing something over the wall. Here I have a piece of code, I throw it over the wall. Hey, gosh, nobody's going to catch it. Or somebody says, well, I got it on my head and I got a headache. Well, I think we don't need to worry that much. If you have a demand and supply side that work together, then it's welcome to the castle. Sorry that Wilma is not here anymore, but otherwise she would really have appreciated this slide. And the open source community, well, it went from friendly beast to monster beast to back again, the friendly beast. The one who can really offer that solution for the outsourcing initiative by the government. Because who else is going to catch that ball coming over the wall? My task as a professional is to lubricate that process and hopefully bring the whole industry from a market stall hobby type of image and operation to a more corporate one, because then money is going to be made. Thank you for your attention. Zijn er nog vragen?
Ja, het is een nieuw initiatief, hè?
Ja.
En richten jullie al, of do you focus only on the Netherlands, Europe, or?
At present, I'm involved in a reuse project for the Dutch provinces, where they really need a reuse framework set up, designed for them, in order to have their present open source applications managed and to be incorporated in that framework, as well as some new initiatives that they have in order to open source upcoming applications that they need. There the whole maintenance and support aspect is addressed, the contractual arrangement. At the moment we are working on a public-private partnership arrangement in which several suppliers, or service suppliers I should say, take up the responsibility of maintaining and updating and supporting the open sourced applications from the provinces. To go back to your question, Holland is ahead of the pack at this point.
But I didn't hear it right. Did you cooperate with Louis Suarez? Or?
Yes.
Okay, from Open Office or from?
Yeah, he is community manager for the Open Office community.
Okay. Yeah.
Several others. One is Rory McDonald and Sandra Grogans. We have somebody in San Francisco and another one in Canada. And Japan and France, we're looking for partners there. But Age of Peers is really about providing international services for transplanting best practice from one country into another. Open data is big in the UK.
Yeah.
Yesterday I had a presentation for some Dutch ministries, and what we try to do now is transplant best practice from the UK into the Dutch environment.
Are they now, I know they have all kinds of open government projects,
Yeah.
but how is their street maps? Because I know that OpenStreetMap was initiated because of the very, very restrictive licenses of British maps. Are they now also opening up their maps by the Ordnance Survey?
The UK Ordnance Survey is at the moment opening up parts of their databases.
Parts,
Yeah.
so not completely.
No, but can you imagine if they sort of throw the whole lot into
Yeah.
the marketplace?
Yeah.
We would be inundated.
Yeah,
And that's what I try to warn against, is that open data, open code, it's there. Governments are really considering to open it up. However, either they throw it up to us, a full 100%, all in one, and then we cannot even start to comprehend what we have in our hands. If you do it in a bit-by-bit way, then at least we can, by trial and error, see what the marketplace needs, what it can absorb, and what is useful and what is not useful in terms of data and code. So I am a champion of a more managed process here. In the UK, they throw it all over the wall and have fun with it.
yeah. Yeah, we had in the Netherlands we had the situation that in 2007, in the beginning, the OpenStreetMap project started, and some 4 months later, the Dutch company Automotive Navigation Data,
Yeah.
they donated the complete street maps of the Netherlands. And I mean, we were all very happy with it, but the backside of it was that we had a very detailed map, but there were no, to say, managers of areas, because we just got the data,
Yeah.
and the data wasn't made by the street mappers themselves. And I still have the impression that it still is, I won't say it is a problem, but it is sometimes difficult for new people to step into the project and contribute street map data, because the level of entrance is now very high. In 2007, when you started to go walk with your dog, you had a very big contribution when you registered it with your GPS. But now you really have to think about the situation in the streets and the driving directions, and so you...
No, but you're right.
Yeah.
Open software communities, open data communities, they all have now huge barriers to entry
Yeah.
for new entrants, for new participants.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that is not necessary. Okay, you could say the meritocracy works. You start at the lowest level and you contribute your way upwards. And while you do that, you learn more about the do's and don'ts and the mores of that specific community. But that takes time, lots of time, years. In order to have a wider adoption of open data, open software, and have people actually make sensible, useful applications out of those two, you need to have a process in which you can contribute earlier than just say after 2-3 years that you really can have a say in the community. I propose a managed version, which is less of a meritocracy on technical basis, but where you can also contribute on, let's say you're a business type, you're more commercial oriented. Well, then you can contribute on that specific area and not be badgered for the lack of code knowledge that you then sort of have.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
For example, if you're a translator, the point of entry is very low. You just have to be able to open the translation application and you can just translate every sentence. That's not hard. So I think there are plenty of opportunities within communities to contribute, even if you're not assembler expert.
You're right, you can contribute. However, my personal experience is that the ones who usually manage those communities have gone via the ICT route, the technical route, and have less affinity with things as marketing the community or managing the community, which is different than code assembly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different mindset, and communities need to be sort of put together with more skills, a different range of skills as well. 80–90% of most community members are technical people. They speak a different language from the one that the marketeer speaks, or that the business organizer speaks,
Mm-hmm.
or that the financial specialist speaks. So I try to sort of redress that imbalance a bit. And once you have redressed that, then the former question is answered. Then entries to participate, barriers to participation are, let's say, lowered.
Yeah, people also often need some kind of a framework in which they can participate. Because when you just say, just go do something, I mean, it's very nice that you are free to do just whatever you want. But
You need to have a list of simple items people can start.
You can't just say do whatever you want. Some kind of structure for people to participate productively and nice. It's,
How to eat an elephant,
yeah.
piece by piece.
Yeah,
Well,
for example.
You could say it's an elephant that you need to eat,
Yeah.
but I'm not technical myself. I only stick to the snout. So
Yeah.
that's the legs, the tail, they are not interesting enough for me, because I don't know anything about code. I know what you could do with it, but I'm only interested in the face. How does it come across?
But to give an example, in OpenStreetMap, you have the problem. For example, you live on Texel or Texel, I don't know the right English way to say it, and you see that a bicycle path has the wrong direction or whatever. I mean, now you just put it in the Dutch mailing list so that people in Limburg or in Gelderland or North Brabant, they get the question or the remark through their mailing list that that bicycle path is the wrong way. But I mean, they live on the other part of the country, so maybe they go on holiday to Texel, but in every other aspect it's not interesting for them. So one of the discussions has been, shouldn't we have some kind of area manager? So some people who would say Amsterdam's my area, and if you want to talk about it, then come to us. And lots of projects, they need more structure to participate productively, because it is often for new people very scary to dive into something that is completely unusual for them.
Well,
And
the
new.
OpenStreetMap example that you put forward here is a great illustration
Yeah,
why too much thrown over the wall
yeah,
at once
yeah,
creates chaos on the receiving side.
yeah,
Whether it's an OpenStreetMap AMD, say, batch that gets thrown at the OpenStreetMap community, which they cannot sort of accommodate organizationally. The same is applicable to if you have a whole batch of code thrown into the marketplace. Or at a community. There is no organizational structure whatsoever ready to accommodate, to sift through it, to enlist participation. So that needs to grow gradually, or it needs to be designed. Either you go the incremental way, which communities normally evolve along, or you go for the more design approach. And the design approach means, here's a batch of software. I need a community. Let's put that community together and first of all look at the infrastructure, the organizational processes, the financing of it. Because that piece of software or that batch of code is still waiting to be sort of caught in the hands.
Yeah.
And that's what the opportunity here now is in Holland. We have a huge opportunity to catch code and use, let's say, the qualitatively well bits of it. But we need to organize. We need to organize first. And government needs to be aware that just throwing at it, at us is not going to reap benefits for them. So.
How do you mean throwing?
Okay, here I have code.
Yeah.
Catch.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't see them even doing that.
They do.
A lot of
They start doing it.
Okay.
Could you give an example?
For the Geo-ICT world, it's the Flamingo viewer.
Oh, yeah.
But wasn't it open source from start?
It was,
Okay.
but there was not a community in place.
Yeah.
So that needed to be designed before they could really open source it in practice. Just just gluing a license on it doesn't make it open source in practice yet, because nobody is able to use it yet. We have several systems in our municipalities. One is called Zakensysteem. It deals with the business processes of a municipality. Well, several municipalities have already designed, built such a thing and are operating it. Well, their neighbor is designing, building and operating it themselves too. But it's not the same piece of software.
Right. So basically what you're saying, all the code which is published should be organized, for example, like in a repository like OZO.
Could be.
So it should be managed.
Yeah, and people should feel responsible for every part of code. Should resemble some people who feel responsible for that code.
Yeah.
So that if something is wrong with it, then people can change it or.
At present, we have what Wilma called the marketplace. Well, that's a really first step. Demand and supply are sort of brought together. However, it's still lacking a process around it, an organization around it, where there's some quality control on what is thrown on that marketplace. How to bring demand and supply, the supplier, the government, together with a potential support company, supplier for that piece of software. It is matchmaking.
Yeah.
That needs
Is there also, you say the government is a supplier, but I can also imagine that there's lots of software where you could see that if a lot of government institutions would pool together, they could buy something or let something be developed and then make it free. I think that sort of coordinating that is also a useful activity.
Yes, but then you need to coordinate several distinct budgets.
Yeah.
And nowadays municipalities start working more and more together. they have shared service centers set up, just in order to sort of combine their efforts and funds into one ICT service center for all the members. However, I propose a neutral entity in between the government and the marketplace, which acts as a clearinghouse for the code, and that acts as a market maker, matchmaker, who is a quality control entity, and therefore can be a trusted third party. Because the marketplace and the government, they talk different languages. Their semantics are totally different. If one talks about the marketplace or the other, there's a huge gap between the perception of each.
I thought that ICTU was supposed to fulfill this role.
ICTU has an advisory role from the government, the central government, towards the departments, municipalities, and so on. They are not the ones that really get in touch with the marketplace, with the suppliers.
Well, what I've seen there is that they get an assignment from government saying we want to have this, and then they go look for somebody who can make it.
Yes, but they are not in a, what they call, it's still a supplier customer relationship. It's not a collaboration, and that's what I talked about here. A public-private partnership where you are both responsible for that outsourced piece of code. And that's a totally different ballgame.
I'm not quite sure I see what you mean. How do you mean responsible for the code? I mean, a company is, what you see is that there are many companies that basically have their own open source project and say, okay, we feel responsible for this. This happens with CMS systems, also with your GU work. And then you have also government, what you don't see is a lot of governments that say, okay, we feel responsible for this code. They usually...
But they should be.
Yeah, sure, but yeah.
So.
Okay, so that's where you're going from.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they should be. Because just throwing it over the wall towards the community, whoever that may be then, is not going to work.
Right.
And if they want to sort of have a sustainable solution for their problem, which means they need software for their processes. If they want to outsource it, then they still have a stake in it. They don't want to have the community or the supplier that takes that piece of software on, lock, stock and barrel, to be bust next day, because then they are stuck with a piece of software that is not maintained, where there's no help desk.
But they could hire, there would be a market opportunity for a different company to step in to fulfill the same role.
That's what I'm talking about. Precisely that.
Okay.
That's the opportunity for open source companies.
Yes. So, but this is the situation right now. If one company goes bust and still their code is in the public, is publicly available, another company could say, okay, we're going to pick that up.